Good morning, everybody. This is Marcia Nedland, and we're just going to let everyone enter the classroom, or whatever you call where we are now. It would be really fun and informative for us if you would type into the chat where you're logging in from. I'm in Tucson, Arizona, where the trees are blooming and it's allergy season. Okay, what do we got here? Memphis, Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. Now that is not a place that I'm familiar with, Michelle. Is it a Twin Cities? Sorry, everyone. I seem to be getting kicked out of Zoom for phone calls now. Is Brooklyn Park, Twin Cities? Oh yeah, second ring suburb. Okay, sixth largest city in Minnesota. Very interesting. After this call, I'm taking a friend from Woodbury to the airport. She's here 6 months of the year and she's going back. So I know a little bit about suburbs of Twin Cities. Everyone, hi, I'm Marcia. We're waiting for everyone to log in and we're typing into the chat where we're logging in from. Oh, Tegan's also from Brooklyn Park. Hey, Deborah from Chicago, my pal. Olivia from Durham. That's really a very interesting city. Hey, Kayla from Plano. Louisville, Texas. Brian, I've had one or two people in one of my classes at the NeighborWorks Training Institute from Louisville, I think, from the city of Louisville. Chapel Hill, Euclid. Not the same as South Euclid, right? Baltimore. Okay, somebody can't hear Janet. Is anyone else having trouble hearing? Maybe Anne can.
I can hear you, Marcia.
Pardon?
I can hear you fine.
Okay.
So if anyone else is having audio issues, let me know.
I think it's just Janet. Harry. Hey, Kenneth from Danville. I've spent time in Danville. Did we meet? It's been quite a few years ago now. Okay, I think I'll go ahead and just start to get started while people continue to log in. Janet, I think you're the only one who can't hear, so I think it must be something on your end. Check your lower bar and make sure that when your menu comes up that you haven't muted yourself. And maybe, Anne, you can check and see if you can unmute her yourself. Oh, it's not her that she can't hear, it's me. Okay, so welcome everyone again. My name is Marcia Nedland. Today's topic is boosting neighborhood strategy, collecting and mapping primary parcel level data. I'm a data geek, and so, or maybe I should say wannabe geek. I love working with people who are great at collecting data, and I love having the data available to be able to interpret and apply to neighborhood strategy. So this is a really, really fun topic for me. Our webinar is hosted, as always, by the National Middle Neighborhoods Community Practice. I'm going to cover just a few slides about middle neighborhoods before we turn it over to our speakers today. Anne's advancing slides for me. Anne's trying, there we go. So the Middle Neighborhoods Initiative is a national one. It's basically focused on just mobilizing attention on middle neighborhoods. It turns out that middle neighborhoods are at risk of disappearing and have been actually disappearing for a number of years now, either to further decline or to gentrification. So while many, city governments and nonprofits and citizens even tend to think of middle neighborhoods as on autopilot and being healthy, often when we look at their long-term trends, they actually aren't. And so we're sort of sounding the warning call now so that people can intervene when it's less expensive to do so, and try to sort of right the course and reinvent these neighborhoods. So our initiative has a community of practice, and the community of practice is just facilitating peer-to-peer learning. That's what's hosting this webinar. We have about 800 practitioners, policymakers, and researchers who are in the COP, and we absolutely encourage you to join it. If you go to our website, middleneighborhoods.org, at the bottom of any page, you will see a place where you can sign up for the community of practice. We do research into topics relevant to middle neighborhoods. I think we might have a Graham-like fellow on this call who's going to be doing some research on middle neighborhoods this year. We do policy analysis and advocacy, mainly through National Community Stabilization Trust, who is the organization with NeighborWorks America that sort of manages and organizes the Middle Neighborhoods Initiative. And we do communication strategies just to advance awareness and technical knowledge. I hope that many of you know NCST. I think Raquel Reddy is here from NCST. It's a great organization that has, it's really changed the landscape of community development by being established in the foreclosure crisis to be an intermediary between foreclosed properties and benevolent developers, giving them a first look at those properties so that they can be returned to productive use in neighborhoods. So what are middle neighborhoods? There's no hard and fast rule, but there tend to be mostly single family homes that were originally built for families with children. They tend still to be well more than 50% owner occupied, but oftentimes that is slowly eroding. If you look at, over the last couple of decades, the housing stock is aging. It's, in acceptable condition, but it often lacks features and updates to compete well for today's home buyers. One of the ones I always talk about is the homes with only one bathroom. That's a really hard sell in many markets for today's home buyers. And interestingly, they tend to be more racially, ethnically, and economically diverse than either their lower income or higher income counterparts. The reason that we talk about them is that, as I mentioned, a lot of them are faltering in their sustainability, which includes being able to reliably attract a replacement owner occupant when a house comes up for sale. Generating home values would actually support quality maintenance without having an appraisal gap. Being able to repel the worst of the investors, as prices get lower in some places, that historically has made them more attractive to what I call bottom feeding investors. And probably many of you are having the experience that these days, prices don't have to be lower to attract investors. There's really a whole new world out there of investors buying up single family stock. Maintaining engaged residents, as turnover happens in the neighborhood, some of the longtime neighbors who were leaders in the neighborhood association and things like that are no longer there. And finally, these are places that we relied on to deliver home equity to first-time home buyers and to deliver a bulk of the property tax revenue to municipal government. And then, in stronger markets and in many markets in the last 2 years, gentrification has become more of an issue than further decline. I actually think that might be what our Graham-like fellow is going to be studying this year, is how permanent is that condition? How can we expect it to be in middle neighborhoods? So in places that have strong economies or housing supply shortages, there's just a lot of investors buying up housing stock. There are people buying second homes. People are leaving big cities and moving to smaller cities. And it's really turned neighborhood housing markets upside down. And these are places, middle neighborhoods, that always had naturally occurring affordable housing. So it's a real problem. So we think that intervening in them now is a real opportunity to try and ensure that if they are improving in terms of housing values and, commercial districts and things like that, that existing residents and businesses get to share in that prosperity, and also to preserve affordable housing before it's lost. Just as an FYI, as I said, there's no hard and fast math to what is or isn't a middle neighborhood. We do have a mapping tool, though, at our website, and this is just a screenshot from that. And I think the link is in the chat. And it uses one of our, sort of crude tools to start to have a conversation about where middle neighborhoods might be in your community, and that's income. We usually look at household income, and on the left side of the screen, you can see that there's a few different tests you can apply to your MSA, which you type in here. If we find that for places where, like legacy cities where there has been population decline and incomes are pretty low, that's usually most useful to use a city test of income to find your middles, because if you used a regional test, you wouldn't find any middles. But for, first ring suburb locations and other more prosperous cities, using a regional or national test may be right for you. And we also have different kinds of income ranges because that kind of varies. I think your gut instinct combined with this will get you started in the right direction. Kimberly has her hand up. Can we unmute her? I don't know if we can or not.
Yep, she's unmuted. So Kimberly, if you wanted to.
Do you have a question, Kimberly?
Nope, sorry.
Oh. Okay, no problem at all. Okay, so let's get on to today. We have two amazing guests who are actually the people out there doing the work in the field. And they have both been doing really interesting things with neighborhood residents around data collection and applying that data to strategy. And in particular, I've asked them to talk today about how they've collected parcel-level building conditions data. So many neighborhood organizations that I work with just don't have that data. City governments, more often than not, don't collect it. And, I think a lot of nonprofits are intimidated at the prospect of how much work and time it might take to collect it on their neighborhood, or in some cases, like Jack's case you'll hear about, they collected on the whole city. But I think both of them have figured out really useful ways to engage neighborhood residents in that data collection, and other techniques to make it easier than you might think. And more importantly, they're going to talk about how they use that data. So Jack Doherty is the Neighborhood Stabilization Director at Youngstown NDC in Youngstown, Ohio. And Becky Kinderas is the Program Director at Grandmont Rosedale Development Corporation in Detroit. So I'd like to welcome both of them, and we're going to, so here's our agenda. Jack is going to talk about strategies for collecting and mapping data, and Becky's going to talk about using data to engage residents and shape strategy. We will do some Q&A after their presentations, and I think we're going to start with Jack now. Thank you so much, Jack.
Sure, cool. So let me pull up my slides here real quick and see if I can get this working. All right. Okay, can everybody see the presentation?
Yeah.
We're good to go. All right, so my name's Jack. I'm Neighborhood Stabilization Director at YNDC, and I'm going to talk to you today about parcel-level neighborhood data collection. I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'll give you a quick overview of us, talk a little bit about the different types of data we collect, why we collect it, and a little bit about how we use it to So just to provide you with a little bit of context on Youngstown, Ohio, we're a city in Northeast Ohio. We lost about 60% of our peak population over the last 4 or 5 decades. Just to give you kind of some context, there are 170,000 folks in 1930 and 2020. We're down to 60,000 just about. We're a city with thousands of vacant homes and buildings. Back in 2008, when we did the first citywide vacant property survey, we had over 4,500 vacant homes. Currently in Youngstown, there is about 1 vacant lot for every 2 to 3 residents in the city, just to provide some context as far as the scale of the issue. In addition to dealing with housing vacancy, there's a housing quality crisis in our neighborhoods too. A lot of folks, low-income homeowners and renters, are living in poor quality, aging housing that hasn't seen a lot of investment, is not a safe or healthy place to live. So that's a huge challenge we face in Youngstown, and also our aging and overbuilt infrastructure. The city was built to support 250,000 residents. Even though we only have 60,000, we still have roads, sewers, electrical systems, streetlights to support a city of 250,000. And with over a third of our population living in poverty, we have limited resources with which to tackle these challenges. So it's very important that we're strategic in how we approach this stuff. So just to show you real quick, this is a map, a citywide map of Youngstown, Ohio. This was the first parcel level comprehensive vacancy survey conducted in the city of Youngstown, just a couple of years before YNDC was formed. And you know, anything you see on this map that has any type of color other than white is a vacant property, just to give you some context. So we were dealing, like I said, with a city of 4,500 vacant houses. This was really the first time that anyone had collected data like this at this scale. This was done with a mixture of residents, resident leaders, neighborhood organizers, and community volunteers back at that time. And it really opened the eyes of the public, neighborhood groups, but also public officials, city officials, and organizations about what a serious problem we were dealing with in Youngstown, and really putting it into perspective. And it ultimately, some of the conversations that evolved from this led to the development of YNDC. We began professional operations in 2010. We're a citywide community development corporation. We really focus on the basics in improving quality of life in neighborhoods, housing, commercial revitalization, neighborhood planning and organizing, basic neighborhood cleanup, those types of things. And we put the residents of our neighborhoods at the center of everything we do and listen to them very closely about what's important. We strategically focus resources because like you saw on that map, we have some significant issues in Youngstown, and we have limited resources. So we've got to use them as strategically as we can to improve the quality of life of our neighborhoods. We're very performance-based. So we focus on getting things done. If we have a plan, we implement it. We also layer partnerships. And what I mean by that is if we find something that needs done, we can't do it for one reason or another. We find someone who can, we bring them to the table, and we figure out how to get it done. And we're incremental. Because like you saw on that map, that's not something that's going to change overnight. So you have to be prepared to be incremental when you're doing this type of work. And I think probably a lot of you know that. Just to give you a quick overview of the different types of things that we do. So our kind of bread and butter work is rehabilitating vacant properties, homes for sale, rental properties too, because we need quality rental housing in our neighborhoods. We also have started rehabilitating commercial properties on some of our corridors, Glenwood Avenue in particular, bringing those properties up to a decent standard of maintenance so that we can occupy them with neighborhoods serving businesses. We do new housing construction, which is something we're working on growing and scaling over the next couple of years. We also are a HUD-approved housing counseling agency working on building people and building their financial stability. We do a lot of home repair across the city too, in virtually every neighborhood, roof replacement, and also helping low-income homeowners address other emergency needs to keep them safely and healthfully in their homes. We do a lot of neighborhood planning in coordination with the city of Youngstown, particularly in middle neighborhoods. We do a lot of neighborhood organizing too, working with residents to address long-standing issues in neighborhoods and address policy and systems changes that are needed. We board and clean up vacant houses, we green vacant lots, we coordinate with neighborhood leaders and partners to address infrastructure issues in neighborhoods, so things like sidewalks, streetscapes, parks, trees. We also operate a healthy foods program, a produce prescription program called the Glenwood Fresh Market, which just opened this year, provides over 1,300 low-income family or low-income individuals with regular access to fresh and healthy food too. So wherever there's a need, we try to find a way to get it done. And we very focused. All of these programs and services use parcel-level data collection in order to make them effective. So just a little bit about the importance of parcel-level neighborhood data, why we collect it. We actually go door to door to every house in some of the neighborhoods that we work in and ask people detailed questions about, what they want to see in their neighborhoods, how their neighborhoods are doing. And we do that so that we can systematically identify the most important priorities for residents, because whatever we're working on, we want to make sure that it aligns with what they think is most important. And then we collect housing building condition data because we want to understand the scope and the scale of the issues that we're dealing with, just like in the 2008 vacancy survey map that I showed you. Understanding that scope and scale gives you the information you need to start developing a plan or a strategy to address those issues. Can't do it all at once, but you can start to figure out where it makes the most sense to start based on that information. So developing a plan and strategy, and that doesn't necessarily just have to inform your work, but the work of your partners, your community organizations, your city, your county land bank can all benefit from that information. Also, once you have that plan, it's very useful to leverage resources. If you have 27 houses that are empty in your neighborhood that can be fixed, this is how much money it's going to take to fix it. You can start to put together a budget and a plan and start leveraging resources to get something done. And we also use parcel-level data to track our progress too. So we track everything we do by the parcel. Every house we rehabilitate, every commercial property, every house we board, every vacant lot we green. We track all that stuff meticulously so we can report out our progress to our funders, to our partners, to show and evaluate our work and make sure that we're doing what we said we would do and having an impact too. This is an example. This is one thing that we've used some of our parcel-level data to help develop and evaluate. This is a housing market analysis of the entire city. And what I just wanted to point out on here really briefly is this particular map helped us to identify where our middle neighborhoods are located. So that the neighborhoods in green that you see there and in yellow are Youngstown's middle neighborhoods or transitional neighborhoods, and are where a lot of our neighborhood planning and parcel-level data collection has taken place, and neighborhood action plans were developed in partnership with the city over the years. Although there's certainly things that we do in every neighborhood too, like home repair, regardless of neighborhood, we do that type of work. So just a couple of more details on the type of parcel-level data we collect. Like I mentioned, detailed resident feedback would go door to door, particularly in our middle neighborhoods where we've had the most intervention, talking to people, identifying priorities, but also over time evaluating progress, how people are feeling that their neighborhood's doing after we've been doing work in the neighborhood for a while. We also collect detailed housing and property condition data. So things like vacancy and occupied houses with exterior issues. So we can identify folks that we can help through some of our home repair programs and other things. We also address or collect information on infrastructure issues in neighborhoods, things like broken sidewalks, dead street trees, high grass, so we can start to develop a plan to address some of those things and leverage resources needed to do that. And like I said, we track and document our work. And one of the tools we've found very useful in doing this is Regrid, which is a data collection software platform designed in Detroit. And we've just found this particular tool to be extremely versatile, intuitive, very easy to use and to train people on, and it's very easy to get the information that you want out of the software too. So I'll show you some examples of how we use that in the different types of surveys that we do. It does have a cost, but there's also other tools that, and there are some incentives too to get it for nonprofit organizations as well. So the first type of survey I wanted to talk about real briefly here is our neighborhood resident feedback survey. So this is a neighborhood scale door-to-door canvassing survey of all households within a given neighborhood. We've done this in some form for our entire history since 2010 in some capacity or another. And our focus, like I mentioned earlier, for the resident feedback survey has been primarily in our middle neighborhoods, the areas of the city where we've had the most intervention in trying to improve conditions. Our survey, our door-to-door survey includes about 30 questions, which are answered by residents at the door. Basic things about like how the neighborhood's doing, what the most important things are that could be done to improve the neighborhood, and things like what amenities would you like to see or not see. Sometimes it's really interesting to hear what people say they don't want to see in their neighborhoods. It's telling us the things that they do. We also collect very detailed demographic information because we want to make sure when we're collecting resident feedback that our feedback is representative of the population in the neighborhood that we're working in. And we also collect contact information too for folks who want to stay involved. So if things are going on in the neighborhood, we can reach out to them and let them know. We have a big public meeting coming up in one of the neighborhoods we surveyed, and we're actually going through right now and calling all those folks to let them know about the upcoming public meeting. Additionally, to get the door-to-door work done, we found to be very successful is hiring 1 to 2 longtime neighborhood residents in the neighborhood that you're surveying to actually go door-to-door and complete the survey with folks. These are generally, in our experience, we've hired folks that are longtime residents that care about their neighborhood, like listening to people and talking to people. And we found that to be a very effective way to reach people. We've actually used some of our housing and building conditions data that we collected to identify the houses in the neighborhood that are occupied, so we know where to point them to do the surveys. And then each house that we visit at least twice. So we'll go to the door once. If we don't reach somebody, we'll go back again and try to catch them a different day and time so that we can catch as many people as we can door to door. Also, if after 2 times we still nobody's answering, we leave a flyer at the door with information about who we are, what we do, and an opportunity to fill out the survey online or to call us to fill it out over the phone if they don't have a time or an opportunity to reach us otherwise. So we give them multiple options to complete it. This is one of our neighborhood stewards, Patricia Stokes, surveying one of her neighbors in one of the neighborhoods we were surveying. You can see she's using the tablet there to survey, and she goes through. You can click on the property that you want to survey. The questions will come up, and then you just go through one question at a time through the survey till you get through the survey, and you can submit it. And I'll show you real quick here what that looks like using ReadGrid. So this is the software I was talking about. So this is one neighborhood called Pleasant Grove. It's a middle neighborhood in Youngstown where we're currently still working on surveying. And that one of the reasons I wanted to show you this one, because it shows you how the different properties come up on the map. So the green ones are properties where someone's completed a survey. We've gone to the door. The neighbor occupant who lives there has completed the survey. The red ones are ones where we knocked on the door once, but we need to go back a second time. The ones in black are ones where somebody answered the door but wasn't interested. And then the yellow ones are ones we haven't visited yet once. So you can see all that information on the dashboard on your computer, but the surveyor can also see that information too, to track where they're at in the neighborhood, to know where they need to go next. So it's super useful for collecting this type of information. Then you can actually go through, and I don't know if you can see my cursor there, but you can click on a parcel and then pull up the survey and see all of the responses that particular resident gave to all of the questions too. And you can export all of their responses into a spreadsheet, so you can aggregate it to make charts and graphs and really analyze the information to determine the neighborhood priorities. So we completed our most comprehensive neighborhood feedback survey this past fall. Surveyed about 700 households in one of the neighborhoods we were working in using our neighborhood steward. 40% of all households in the neighborhood responded to the survey, which is a tremendous number. That's more than the percentage of people in the neighborhood who vote. I mean, it's just a very effective way to reach people. We also, because we collected that demographic information, knew it was representative of the neighborhoods that we were serving. And we've already started using that information to inform our programs and strategies. One of the things folks said in the neighborhoods, we need more neighborhood safety strategies. We've got an uptick in violent crime, so we want to do more. We want to do something about it. So we're researching that now, trying to figure out a way we can be more involved in that. But we've also, one of the things the residents said was they needed access to a grocery store or fresh market in the neighborhood. So that helped us identify where we wanted to site our produce prescription, our fresh market program. It's actually located in one of the neighborhoods that we surveyed here that said that was a priority. So And then it also is a good way to just evaluate, like I said, the ongoing impact of the work too. Here's a couple of examples of charts that came out of that particular survey, identifying, for instance, that 89% of residents that we surveyed in the neighborhood said that addressing nuisance property is a major priority for them. Repairing owner-occupied houses, 80% said that was important to them in their neighborhood. So these are useful pieces of information to know to inform your programs, but also your partners, your funders. Here's a couple of examples. You can collect more detailed data too. So actually open-ended questions. Here's a good example. I think YNDC has the right approach. I purchased my home back in 2017 and I witnessed a marked improvement in the area. I mean, that kind of information lets you know if you're on the right track. There's another one here at the bottom about improving the Glenwood corridor. The neighborhood commercial district is very important. And this particular resident told us specifically what they didn't want to see on that corridor. So these are useful pieces of information to have and know to inform your work. In addition to our resident survey, getting back to the housing and building conditions, that's another type of parcel level data that we do a lot of data collection for. When we do it, we always do a walking survey of all the residential parcels or properties in a particular neighborhood. We use tablets and regrid to document the conditions. Our surveys typically include all vacant houses in any condition, whether they're abandoned, just empty and maintained, or for sale. And we also identify all occupied houses with serious exterior issues that need attention, that are distressed for some reason or another, that are in danger of becoming vacant if something's not done to address those issues. So the reason we focus on those things is because those are the things that residents are identified as the greatest priorities. And also, we need to maintain a focus in terms of the type of data that we're collecting, so that we're collecting things that are most useful to us in addressing the issues. So we typically do this at a citywide scale about every 2 years in partnership with the city of Youngstown to just track progress over time. But you can do this at the neighborhood level. We've done it at the neighborhood level as part of our neighborhood action plans. It can be done in a variety of different scales and ways. This last year in 2021, we did a citywide housing condition survey. We used 2 trained interns, and we covered all 34 square miles of the city in approximately 6 weeks. So it doesn't necessarily take a lot of people, and it doesn't necessarily take a long time to do this type of work. If it's something that's going to be useful to you, it will pay dividends over time. It's well worth the investment. We also focus on just, for our surveyors going out there and surveying, collecting information on properties, we use very basic questions to allow them to easily evaluate the properties. So, does the house have grossly peeling paint? Is there, if you're identifying vacancy, is there a phone book on the porch? Are there broken windows and doors? Is the electric meter listing? Those just basic questions that allow the surveyors to give you detailed information that you're looking for on the property conditions. A couple of useful things about regrid just to keep in mind as you're doing this type of work. There are some really good quality control tools in regrid. You can actually see, as you have surveyors going out and surveying properties, you can see them in real time on your computer dashboard, and you can actually check the surveys. Each survey will have a photograph of the property. If you choose to document your properties with photographs, you can check that against what's actually included in the survey question responses to make sure that the two match up. You can also look at an aerial photograph on the ground in your neighborhood and make sure that the roof line of the house in the photograph matches the roof line on the ground, and make sure you've got the surveyor mark that parcel on the right spot. You can also import other useful data to double check your work too. So one thing we used when we were identifying vacant houses throughout the city, we looked at the United States Postal Service vacancy data. We were able to display those properties on the map. So we surveyed the whole city. We identified all the vacant properties all the properties we thought were vacant. We looked at that data and compared the two and went back and double checked some of those houses to make sure we didn't miss any that were vacant. So there's a lot of useful ways that you can double check your work using other data by importing it into the map. You can also import other useful data and analyze it with your survey data too. So for instance, for us, it was really useful, and I'll show you here in a second, how we, looked at tax delinquency and owner occupancy in terms of the data too. We added information about that to our survey so we could see which houses were vacant and also tax delinquent, because the strategy for dealing with those is different than if they're tax current. Because the land bank can be involved if it's a tax delinquent property. Here's an example of what our housing or building condition survey looks like in ReGrid. And you can see this is the Pleasant Grove neighborhood again here. All of the orange properties that you see are vacant. The dark orange are vacant tax delinquent. The blue are occupied with roof issues, and the light blue are occupied with other types of exterior issues that need addressed. So we can actually identify, the different types of properties that we're looking to address with different types of strategies. When you click on one of these properties, you can actually see the photograph that was taken. You can see the date and time it was taken. You can also see the responses that the surveyor gave to all of the questions in that survey too. All in real time. You can pull this right up at any time. You can search up any address. You can also export all this data into an Excel spreadsheet, import it into other software, or just use it for tracking different things. So it's a very useful software platform for collecting this type of information. This is an example of the same neighborhood here. This was a neighborhood action planning survey we did in this neighborhood back in 2014. This is Helena Avenue here. And you can see there's about 12, these orange properties, there's about 12 vacant properties on the street at the time. And we developed a strategy for addressing every single one of those in that plan. This is one particular house that was included on that street, 3029 Helena. This is one we recommended for demolition. It was vacant, it was tax delinquent. We worked with the land bank to get it torn down. Because we had a detailed plan for how we wanted to improve things, we were able to leverage the resources to actually build a new house on that property and several others on the street. So this is just an example of how using that parcel level data and having a plan and strategy based on that data can help you leverage the resources to get things done and improve the quality of life, street by street, block by block, and parcel by parcel. And if you look back at this map here, you can see this is Helena Avenue. If you look back at the ReGrid survey from 2021, Helena Avenue, a lot fewer parcels are identified on this map as having issues now, because we've started to systematically address all of those. And in fact, this one here is actually one we actively rehabilitated and will be selling to a homeowner here soon. So working systematically to address those issues parcel by parcel on that block completely transformed the condition of all the houses on that street in that particular neighborhood we were working in. We also, over time, this is an example here of a neighborhood action plan impact analysis. So we looked at all the neighborhoods where we put together these parcel level plans and evaluated progress from 2014 when we developed the plans through 2018. And looked at how things changed in the neighborhoods over time. Because we collected that detailed parcel level data, we were able to do that. This is our 2021 housing conditions survey citywide that I mentioned. Because we collected this data, we were able to identify that we're, for the first time in the history of, at least as long as I've been alive, we're actually at a point where we might be able to address the worst of the vacancy in Youngstown. We were at 4,500 properties in 2008. Now we're down to 1,700 in 2021. Only about 750 of those actually need to be demolished. We identified that the need for home repair continues to be great. There are over 1,000 owner-occupied houses in Youngstown with significant exterior issues that need attention. We know that because we collected that information, and we use that to raise funds to actually get the work done. We identified that poor quality rental housing persists throughout the city, and we can use, by knowing where those houses are located, we can identify when we have a problem landlord that owns houses in neighborhoods all over the city and start working to address those landlords. And like I said, you can do this stuff at the citywide scale like we do, but you can also do it at the neighborhood level too. Depending on the scale of the city and the size and the resources. These are a couple of recent stories about how our citywide housing condition survey from 2021 has been used by some of our partners, including the city and the county land bank, to leverage and allocate resources to demolish the worst remaining properties in the city, because they know where those houses are and they've identified they can identify how much they need to request in funding to actually get the work done, and they can make a compelling case to get that funded. So, just try, it provides a good example of how, that data translates into getting the resources you need to get things done. Other parcel level data that we collect, I'll just go over this real quick. We like I mentioned, we map and document infrastructure issues, so we can work on, developing plans to address those. And we also are very meticulous about documenting the work we complete as we complete it. We track it, some of it in Regrid, but we track all of it in a detailed spreadsheet. You don't have to have a really complex system to do this type of work. You can use a spreadsheet to do some of it. Here's another example in Regrid. This is a sidewalk survey we did. We documented all the broken sidewalks on the Glenwood Avenue corridor on the south side of Youngstown. And we're actually now using that. We put together a budget for how much we need to replace all of those. And we've requested funding from a couple of folks to start to do that. This is an example of a Regrid survey where we documented all of our board ups. We actually go out and document every house that we board up. We survey it before we board it, so it's documented it was open at the time we boarded it. We survey it after, and we're able to track what we did, how many openings we boarded. And the city actually takes that information to court to find the negligent owners. And if they appeal, that we've got photo documentation of when it was boarded, how it was boarded, and why it was boarded. And that helps the city win cases. This is a spreadsheet that we use for our organizational output tracking. We track every property, every dumpster, every vacant lot we green, every homeowner that we create through our housing counseling program. We track all that stuff by the parcel. And because we do that, and we do that meticulously, we're able to, I put this map together in Google Maps in about 2 minutes from that spreadsheet. I can see every property in the entire city and region that we've had an impact on for home repair over the last 10 years, just because we're meticulous about tracking that stuff as we go. And I use this spreadsheet when I go to neighborhood meetings or to city council to demonstrate the impact of our work. Like it takes a little bit of work on the front end to track all this stuff, but if you do this, it will pay dividends. And it helps with transparency, helps you demonstrate the impact of your work to the folks that you're doing the work for. This is an example of our 10-year economic impact analysis that we did of our work. Because we collect all this parcel level data, we're able to, and we track all of our work, we're able to evaluate. We actually, during those 10 years, leveraged almost $60 million in economic impact in Youngstown's neighborhoods. And this is just kind of a quick overview of those stats from 2019. Now that we're in 2020, or 2022, these are some updated stats. We're at over 70 million in direct investment in Youngstown's neighborhoods since 2010, due to the work of YNDC and our partners. So just to kind of demonstrate the impact of what parcel level data can do for tracking in your performance in your organization. A couple of key lessons as you're doing this type of work. I recommend keeping it simple. Collect just the information you need. For example, with our housing condition data, we could survey every house, but if a house is in good condition, how are we going to use that data? We don't necessarily need that. So, the amount of time it takes to collect, it's not worth the time that it takes to, put it together. So things like that, you want to keep in mind. Collect just what you need and keep the survey questions simple, basic, intuitive, make it easy for your surveyors to learn what you're looking for, make it easy to train them. I recommend building a sustainable routine for collecting the info too. So if you evaluate stuff every 5 years, collect it once every 5 years or every 2 years, like we do for the citywide housing conditions survey. And just track and document your work continuously. Super, super important for demonstrating your impact. Highly recommended. Thank you guys so much for your time. I hope this was helpful, and happy to take any questions once we get through everything, but I want to make sure to get this over to Becky. So I will close.
Thank you so much, Jack. That was amazing. I know a lot of you now are going, Regrid, what's that? I need to know more about Regrid. I just put their website in the chat, and as Anne pointed out, we did do another webinar last year about using Regrid. I've used it a little bit, and I don't know of anything else out there like it. They have parcel maps already. As Jack said, it's an organization that started in Detroit, but it's now a national thing that's used by people all over the country, and it's just so user friendly. And I don't think it's that expensive. Like for $100, I think I got an annual membership in it. It means I can look at, any parcel map anywhere. I think I have also on a project used it where we downloaded parcel maps for different neighborhoods and a set of data, and that cost about $200 per neighborhood. How much money do you spend on it a year, Jack?
I don't have the exact figure in front of me, but you don't necessarily have to spend the amount of money we do to get the basics.
Right. So, and I will also hope that people are translating, even though it just so happens that Youngstown, and you'll find in a second from Becky that in Detroit too, my guess is that I've watched over the years that a lot of cities, the point at which they get really serious about data collection is when things are so bad, they got to count how bad it is. And, that's kind of when Regrid got created. It was when Detroit was so devastated by tax delinquency that they started to map it. Is that right, Jack?
So I just wanted to point out real quick that Ian mentioned in the chat, Ian, our director, that we pay $2,500 a year for 10 users.
Okay, so that's not bad at all. And so somebody had posed a question about something about how to think about prevention so they don't end up with many vacancies. And to me, here's my answer, is that you should be doing this kind of tracking now and not wait until things are so bad that you're forced to do it. And I guess it's just human nature, but most of the groups I see that are this meticulous about tracking conditions in neighborhoods got started because things got really bad first. And so I think that, in Jack's case, because of his market, they're tracking only really, vacancies and tough conditions, as he said, because that's what would give them something to work with. But if you're in a neighborhood that's much healthier, you could start to track a different set of data, like, where, all the roofs that need to be repaired, and you could maybe pull together some kind of a group buying effort so that roof replacement was easier. You could just start to tackle some of these maintenance issues before they get out of control, assuming that you're lucky enough to be in a market where your entire manufacturing-based economy didn't get closed down. So, but we will definitely have some Q&A time after this. So let's switch over to Becky now, who I think, if I remember right, was actually brought to their organization. It was residents who led them to really start to document what was going on with foreclosures and vacancies. So Becky, go ahead and bring up your slides.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Becky Kinderis, and I'm the program director at Grandmont Rosedale Development Corporation. We are a nonprofit organization founded in 1989, and we are in Northwest Detroit. So you can see kind of, this is a map here, and in this outlined area is the Grandmont Rosedale community. And the community is actually comprised of 5 distinct neighborhoods. They each have their own very active neighborhood associations. And then within those associations, there is an extensive network of block clubs, and then resident committees that come together from across the 5 neighborhoods to promote the neighborhood, to organize social activities, and occasionally to address challenges in the community as well. So I'm going to talk about one of those committees and a little bit about GRDC's work as well. Grandmont Rosedale Development Corporation has 3 core programs. We do housing work, we do economic development, and we do community engagement. So just wanted to give you guys kind of some context of what the Grandmont Rosedale neighborhoods look like. So these 2 houses can be found in the exact same neighborhood. So our housing stock varies quite a bit from these smaller, 1 and 2 bedroom homes to beautiful historic mansions. So you'll see the whole range, and you'll see a wide range of like areas that are really stable and areas that are more distressed. So by and large, Grandmont Rosedale is considered a stable neighborhood when compared with other communities in Detroit, but we're certainly not without our challenges. So this is taking us back a little bit, but this is a map of Detroit. Everything that you see in red is a property that was tax foreclosed on between 2002 and 2016. So you can see kind of the scale of the problem. And you can also see that the Grandmont Rosedale neighborhoods here on the west side, you can almost make out the boundary of the neighborhoods because there's a lot less red there than some of the other neighborhoods in Detroit. So it kind of goes to show how we are both stable, but distressed at the same time. And this map does not even include any of the mortgage foreclosures. So when you factor those in, you can really see what Detroit has been dealing with for the last 20 years and beyond. And of course, we all know what that problem looks like for neighborhoods. So when you end up with vacant properties, they get broken into, they attract illegal activity. The properties are scrapped for valuable materials, and then you're left with what were once beautiful historic homes that now kind of look like this condition. And during the Great Recession, we started to notice in our community a huge rise in the number of vacant properties in our community. There were always a few, but never to the scale that we saw with the Great Recession. So that's when we really started trying to, address vacant properties in a different way. And then you also have the problem of vacant land in Detroit. So there have been a lot of different estimates that have been thrown out there, but we've had quite a few demolitions over the years. And so estimates range that there are between 24 to 40 square miles of vacant lots in Detroit. So, at the high end there, you could fit all of Miami or San Francisco just in our vacant lots in Detroit. So that does present a new challenge of what to do with all of these vacant lots. So again, especially, during the Great Recession, we saw a lot of challenges with foreclosures going up, vacancies going up, housing values were down, sales were down. So Grandmont Rosedale residents across the 5 neighborhoods, they came together and wanted to see what they could do to help address some of these vacancies in the community. And so they formed the Vacant Property Task Force, and we at GRDC began facilitating meetings, and we had about 20 members. We meet monthly at the coffee shop in the community and or our office. And we have been meeting monthly since 2009. So a very dedicated group of volunteers. And one of the first things that we wanted to do was to actually do a comprehensive survey of our 5 neighborhoods to determine, exactly how many properties were vacant in the community. And so we did utilize Regrid as well. And we had volunteers from the task force go out and survey all 5,500 homes, whether or not they were vacant in our community. And because we were going to be serving some occupied properties as well, we really wanted to make sure that our volunteers were equipped with talking points and some safety measures because of course people are going to want to know, why you're taking a picture of their house or looking at their house. So we started with getting volunteers together and hosting trainings where we showed them how to use the software. We purchased tablets and data plans for those tablets, since a lot of our volunteers did not have smart devices where they could actually pull up the Regrid app in real time and survey the properties. So we lent those out. We made sure that volunteers had these really visible safety vests so they look more official. And then we provided magnets for their cars that identified them as volunteers. So just those measures in of themselves help to kind of, ease some of that concern from neighbors as to why folks are kind of poking around. But, we just tell them if anybody asks questions that, let them know that we're surveying the whole neighborhood, because this is the data that we use to get home repair grants, to do beautification projects and things like that. And it's important for us to document every property. So we have a record of how, photo of how things change over time. So we sent them out. We weren't as fast as Jack's crew. I would say we probably spent a couple months doing the initial survey, with volunteers going out maybe a couple hours a week. And we did this as an annual survey as well. And the really nice thing about Regrid is that you can customize the survey to any sort of questions that you would like. So you can actually create questions where you might be talking to the resident of the home and you might be asking them questions, or you could set up your survey to just assess, external or exterior conditions. So when we first started out, we only used the app to identify vacant properties, occupied properties, property conditions, and vacant lots, things like that. We have since used the app for surveys where we're actually talking to residents, asking them, do they know about resources that might be available to them? Do they have a need for home repair grants, that sort of thing? And the other nice thing about Regrid is that when you first start off, it's kind of been described a little bit already, but there's a sort of base package that you get from Regrid that will have ownership information, oftentimes photos of the place, parcel descriptions and dimensions, tax records, and information from the assessor's office. So it varies by region depending on what Regrid has access to. If you're in a really rural area, you might have less data available to you. But then you can kind of build off of that and add your own custom surveys. So what we learned is that 11% of our properties were vacant, over 600 properties. So quite a few, and throughout the whole neighborhood. But in the second picture here, you can see how we then took those individual properties and we could kind of analyze how, which blocks were the most distressed, which had the highest density of vacant properties. So you can see some here, maybe not so surprising because this is a freeway that runs through the neighborhood. So there's quite a bit of vacancy here, but also toward our northern boundary, there's 3 blocks there that are notoriously more distressed than other areas. And from there, we built out action steps and an action plan. And this particular plan was sort of shared by multiple parties that were responsible for implementing it. So Grandma Rosedale Development Corporation took on a lot of home repair and rehabs of single family homes. The task force, the vacant property task force, did a lot of cleanups and advocacy. And then we had the 5 neighborhood associations come together to do, marketing of the neighborhood and that sort of thing. So these were our strategies here, and we'll kind of go through a lot of the work of the vacant property task force. And what I love about them is they're just a group of residents. Most of them are senior citizens and, not particularly trained in this industry, but they've accomplished so much over the years. And I think that it's a really good model that can be accessible to any community to really replicate. So we started with just sharing resources and information with the community. This is a picture of one of our tax foreclosure prevention workshops. So we'd partner with other nonprofits in the area that specialized in assistance, foreclosure assistance. We'd get the word out. We do door-to-door outreach, pass out flyers. We distribute just lists of resources of who to call if there's something going on in the neighborhood or if there's a code enforcement issue. So we started with just getting the word out. And then we knew that the task force was going to need a little bit of money to take on some projects. So we started hosting fundraisers. We would sell Christmas wreaths and trees. We would sell roses at Valentine's Day. We would buy out the community theaters, show and resell the tickets for a profit. We wanted to start painting the boarded up homes, but we didn't have a budget for paint. So we just put a call out to neighbors to donate any leftover paint in their basement. And the great thing about that is when you mix a bunch of colors together, you usually end up with brown, and that's about the color of brick homes. So it works out pretty good. So, we'd probably make about $1,000 on every fundraiser. And slowly over time, we were able to build out this tool library. So it's a 40-foot shipping container, and it is filled with all sorts of different supplies for cleanups that can accommodate up to 100 volunteers at one time. So we have a riding mower, range of regular mowers, weed whackers, shovels, loppers, buckets, gloves, literally every kind of garden tool that you can imagine we have. Of course, we did graffiti removal. So whether that's washing the graffiti off here or painting over it, I think we removed over 600 instances of graffiti. We boarded up properties. We painted those properties so that the boards would match the facade. I think like this picture does a really good example. If you're just driving by, it's not going to catch your eye because the yard is maintained and all kind of blends in. And that's a factor in when someone's deciding whether or not they want to buy a home in a middle neighborhood or a neighborhood that has some signs of distress, right? Are those things minimized? We disguised vacant properties, and we had a whole network of about 500 volunteers throughout the whole community that had signed up and agreed to take responsibility for a vacant property near them. And so what that could look like is mowing the grass, decorating the house for the holidays, Christmas, Halloween, putting a trash receptacle out on the curb during trash pickup days, driving up and down the driveway when it snows, so you're leaving behind tire tracks, all these things to make somebody just kind of drive by, think that the house is occupied, right? And that prevents the break-ins and the scrapping. This is a house that went through several iterations of disguising. We started with the board up, we painted the boards to match the house, and then we actually did better than that, and we even put on vinyls that looked like stained glass and windows. And so you could hardly tell unless you were really close up that house was boarded up. Of course, mowing lots and mowing yards was a huge thing. So we did that thousands of times over the last 10 years. Cleaning up of litter and illegal dumping. So we saw a huge rise in illegal dumping. You can see one of our before and afters here. So a lot of times it would be heavy bulk items, but we also organize monthly litter pickups. And those are great, especially when you want to get youth involved, because it's not that that heavy lifting of some of the bulk items that you find with trucks that have just kind of dumped in a vacant property. And we started building relationships with city agencies and really focusing on leveraging those partnerships. In the first picture here, you can see one of our volunteers. Before the pandemic, she basically lived at our office. She was always making code enforcement reports and just really on top of everything. In the picture on the right, you can see a couple of our task force members pictured with the Detroit Water Department. We were in close communications with them when, pipes would burst in vacant properties and then from freezing, and then you'd have water running in basements or flooding. And so we would notice these sorts of things during our surveys, and then we could, report when water was left on in a vacant property and get the water department out to turn off and resolve those issues. Also deed fraud. So, one of the things that we did notice because of our diligence in constantly keeping an eye on these vacant properties is that we started tracking who was coming and going. We knew they were vacant. We knew nobody should be in the homes, right? So task force members started taking diligent notes about when they would see people come and go. They would ask questions, did you buy the house? Do you have a deed? And then do research to try to determine if someone had legitimately bought the house or if they were just claiming that they own the home and trying to then sell it or rent it in a scam. And so we were actually able to bring one individual who had stolen 24 homes all the way to prosecution. Here's a picture of the vacant property task force getting an award for their work in tracking all of that. And of course, some demolition was necessary. We certainly try to rehab homes as much as possible, but some homes did need to be demolished. We kept a really accurate list of our properties that we wanted to see demolished, and we spent a lot of time advocating with the city of Detroit about which properties needed to come down for several years. By the time we finally saw our first demolition crew out, we actually had a party and got cake and everything because it had been several years of advocating for that. And then, with the demolition came more vacant lots, and so we started adding bollards and fencing to really cut down on that illegal dumping, because you can't really back a truck up into the lots anymore. And then, of course, we needed to do something with the vacant lots. So we probably have 30-40 lots that we have activated over the years in some capacity. We have a tree nursery where we planted saplings and then transplant those when they grow older, larger, to other places in the neighborhood. We have flower gardens, rain gardens. We also tried to really observe how residents were already using vacant lots in the community and kind of build off of those. So for example, there was one vacant lot that was adjacent to a commercial corridor. And we noticed the grass had really been worn down in a diagonal path because people used it as a cut through. And so we just paved it and made a walking path because that's how people were clearly using that space. In another instance, we had a resident who was parking on a vacant lot next door to him, just technically against code because it's not a paved surface. So we just made a permeable parking pad for that neighbor to actually have, a driveway. And then in some other spots, we created gathering spaces. You can see some youth volunteers here getting ready to paint the giant life-size checkers and chessboard that you see on the right, and installed picnic tables and things like that. The public art in the picture on the right is from the Detroit Institute of Arts. They have a a program called Inside Out, where they actually bring replicas, weatherproof replicas of the pieces in the museum out into public spaces to make it more accessible for folks. So we have those art pieces that change periodically throughout the neighborhood. And then, of course, as I mentioned, some of the committees that come together from across all of the associations, we organized collectively for many years a neighborhood-wide or community-wide open house tour, trying to really market Grandma Rosedale as a great place to live and to attract new home buyers. And so multi-neighborhood effort, we provided free shuttle buses and tours. We'd have volunteers on the buses narrating, talking about some of the history, some of the selling points of the community. It'd always be a big effort leading up to any open house event where all the neighborhoods would come together to make sure everything was cleaned up and looking good. We typically have, maybe 30 homes available to walk through for sale. And usually all of those would sell pretty quickly after the open house tour. At our community house, we'd have volunteers set up with tables talking about all of the different amenities in the neighborhoods, the youth sports leagues and the different parks and things like that, just really passing out information about all the social programs. And we typically would have about 150 to 300, if memory serves me correctly, visitors each year for that. And then, of course, Grandma Rosedale Development Corporation took on some of the heavy lifting with home repair grants to owner occupied homes, and then rehabs of homes as well. And then we, of course, sell those to families that want to live in the neighborhood. So today we have renovated over 120 single family homes. We have provided home repair assistance to over 156 homeowners. Vacancies are back to where they were before the Great Recession. And we have since purchased all of the or the majority of the vacant lots in the community, and we're activating those as community gathering spaces, and we're continuing to build upon those and just add further enhancements. So our vacant property task force still meets monthly, but because we have so few vacant properties now, their scope of work has broadened a bit. So they've now sort of tackle general beautification activities. So that might be like organizing flower plantings in the islands along our residential boulevards. It's not really a vacant property, but it is a beautification activity. And they're getting really excited about getting it into code enforcement of occupied rental properties. So making sure that we're not dealing with the effects of slumlords and things like that in our community. And so we still do use regrid. However, we don't use it as an annual survey of vacant properties anymore. We have a handful of vacancies that we can just track in a spreadsheet. We don't really feel the need to do an annual survey of all 5,500 homes anymore. But we do use regrid for specialized activities. So for example, if we are doing door-to-door outreach about something like the child tax credit, we can mark properties that we have visited. Foreclosure outreach is a big one still. There's way less foreclosures in the community than there were 10 years ago. In fact, some of our foreclosure outreach now has kind of expanded to areas outside of our initial service boundaries. So we're kind of working in our border communities now. But it is still really useful. What's showing here on the map is a list that I pulled of folks that we had talked to that had said, 2 years ago that they were in need of home repairs, and we actually can see what, like this person needed plumbing assistance. We were talking to them because they were facing foreclosure, but we did ask a question about home repair. So now I filtered this list to see, who is no longer in tax foreclosure, but said they needed home repair. So these folks, the blue dots on the map, these folks have redeemed their homes from the tax auction. They were prevented, they're no longer in foreclosure, but they likely still need some home repair. And what's great about this is that Regrid automatically updates the tax status on these parcels. So in real time, you can kind of see who has resolved their tax issues and who hasn't. So I actually have, for the first time in a while, we have some home repair dollars this summer. And so, I was looking at this, and maybe we can start our outreach with the folks that had already identified to us in 2019 that they needed home repair support. So that's some of the ways that we would use Regrid now. And I just have included a few resources here for anyone who's interested. Obviously, go to the Regrid site. There's so many different price points depending on how you want to use the software, for anyone who's concerned about that, but they do offer scholarships depending on like the size of your organization and the nature of your work. So please, don't let the cost be a barrier. Have a conversation with the Regrid staff first. I've also included here, Detroit Future City has a wonderful guide to working with vacant lots on their website. There's dozens of examples there and how you can repurpose vacant lots. So if you're doing anything in that area, I would definitely check that out. And then, this here, the Michigan Community Resources Vacant Property Toolbox, that is it's an older document at this point, but there's still a lot of information on the types of strategies that Detroit neighborhoods use to address vacancies. And I did include a couple other organizations, United Community Housing Coalition, if you want to look at how housing assistance is working in Detroit. They're kind of the go-to organization for that. And then the Detroit Land Bank Authority for, it's just interesting to see how land banks throughout the country, what different programs and models they have for acquiring or disposing of lots and structures, right? So that's about all I had for my presentation. Thank you.
Sorry, Becky, I was having trouble unmuting myself. Thank you so much. What an amazing story and very interesting uses of data and ways that residents just, they made the connections and kind of riffed on the data and figured out things to do. I also love that last map that you showed where you sort of filtered for properties that were redeemed from tax delinquency, but that had expressed a need for rehab money. To me, that's kind of the difference between having a program and having a strategy. You could just have announced your rehab dollars and done a first come, first serve kind of thing, but this may be very much more strategic in stabilizing those vulnerable properties. So I think that's really cool. So let's definitely open it up to Q&A here. You can raise your hand and talk. You can type it into the chat or type it into the Q&A. We do have one in the Q&A or a couple. Will this presentation be shared afterwards? And yes, it will. And usually does a follow-up email to everyone who registers for a webinar and gives you a link to the recording of the webinar, as well as we usually try to post the presentation, the PowerPoint presentations of our speakers as well on our website. And if we can do that, we'll have a link to that as well. And also the question, is the survey map publicly available? And that question was posted back when Jack was speaking. So I'm not sure which survey map you're speaking of, Rebecca, if you're still here. And I know that Ian did post also a link to their online, an up-to-date current online map that they're working with.
And I can answer that. So
Sure.
the information, the citywide housing conditions survey, that is public. So that is something, Ian shared a link to that so that people could take a look at it in the chat. We generally don't broadcast that information because sometimes, property investors will troll that information to try to identify vacant houses or things like that. But it is publicly available. And if somebody would like to take a look at that, please check it out on the link. The neighborhood resident feedback survey is not public because it includes people's contact information. So that one we can't share with you, unfortunately. We can share the feedback though from that survey. We did put out an analysis of our survey that we did in the fall of the greater Glenwood area. So I can definitely put a link to that in the chat so that people can access that too. And that's like an overview of what people said and what people felt were priorities in the neighborhood too. So I can
It's
definitely
like
do that.
aggregated responses. Right.
Mhm.
Okay, let's see. So Laura asks, where does a community start? If you haven't ever collected any data, presumably parcel level data. Where would either of you suggest that she starts?
I would, well, it depends on who you have at your disposal. So are you working with a team of staff? Are you working with a team of residents? Putting the call out to get your residents or whoever you want to assemble your team. Obviously using a regrid is a great tool. You don't have to. You can certainly use pen and paper and just kind of map things out by hand. Depends on the how big of an area you want to cover, I guess. But really just getting people interested in the cause, starting to document so you have that baseline. And then once you have the data and you can analyze the trends, that's going to inform what direction you want to go with your interventions or your strategies. Because maybe your problem is not as bad as you thought, or maybe it's worse than you thought. So from there, you can develop your strategies. But if you're looking to engage residents, obviously, social media and your website and those sort of platforms are great. But I found that I get my biggest turnout and participation in two ways. One, door to door, knocking on people's doors, literally just talking to them, passing out flyers. The other strategy is use your gatekeepers. So if you have a resident who knows everybody, get them on your side and they will happily make the phone calls and activate the networks and all the people they know and lobby those folks to get involved.
That's great. I was thinking an answer to this might be to check first with whoever your city government partner is, your planning department or a regional planning department, and just see kind of what do they already have that they could make available to you. I think everybody has GIS nowadays and geographic information systems of some kind and can generate a parcel map for you with like the assessor's data on it or data that the city collects anyway. So that might be a first start. And of course you have to know, what you want to find out as well. Jack, how would you answer that question about getting started?
Well, getting started, I mean, one thing I would say, keep it, like I said at the end of my presentation, keep it simple. You don't have to, kind of like what Becky said, starting with a pen and paper and just taking notes is a good place to start. I mean, entering that information into a spreadsheet once you get it all back to the office. I mean, you can start with the very basics like that and get pretty far. Don't be afraid to do that, to start with the basics in order to start collecting that information. When we were doing the neighborhood action plans, we had what were called neighborhood action teams, and we get together with residents, with city officials, with other partners to work through priority properties. So we would list in a spreadsheet all of the priority properties in that neighborhood. They're between maybe 10 and 20, depending on the size of the neighborhood. The worst properties that needed attention, and different ones needed different types of solutions. So we list the strategy, we list the ownership information, we list all that stuff into one spreadsheet, and just start there, working through those, 10 to 20 properties that really are the biggest problems in the neighborhood. And if you're dealing in middle neighborhoods, 10 to 20 properties can get you pretty far sometimes, particularly if they're the ones that are having the most negative impact on the neighborhood. So, don't be afraid to start with the basics and start with, a simple spreadsheet or a simple list and work from there.
I think that's right. And, depending on what your organization does, if you do rehab lending, then ask your rehab staff what they wish they knew about the neighborhood, help them, enable them to create sort of what the questions or the assessment things are that you want to do out in the neighborhood, and what would make it easier for them to identify properties for rehab and stuff like that, priorities for rehab. There's a question in from Susan Perry. She says, that's a lot of rehab projects you did. What's the average rehab cost, and how did you get them all done? She's having a hard time finding willing contractors. I'm not surprised. I can't get my contractor to show up here either. Go ahead.
I think
Jack?
that's for me. Rehab costs range depending on the condition of the home, how big it is, how large it is. I would say on the lowest end, I'd have to verify these numbers, but I would guess 30 to 50,000 on the low end. On the high end, a couple $100,000. And so a large part of our rehabilitation projects come from when we have funding sources specifically dedicated to rehab. So it's not that we're able to acquire every property that we would love to see rehabbed and have the funds to do it. It's largely dependent on when we have funding sources. And oftentimes, particularly after the Great Recession, we were putting more money into a property than we might be able to sell it for. So subsidizing it with, funds from the city or the federal government
Like
to help
NSP.
stabilize Detroit neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm. And Jack, you also do rehab with existing homeowners, right?
Well, we operate home repair programs with existing homeowners, and we rehabilitate vacant properties too. But I would echo a lot of the things that Becky said. I mean, it depends on the property, the condition. Some of the houses do require a subsidy to rehabilitate depending on the market conditions. Some of them we do completely market rate to, in other words, not just using private resources and not public subsidies. It really kind of depends on the circumstances of each individual property, but we come up with a detailed plan before we tackle, the specifics. And a lot of the properties that we identify for rehabilitation come out of the property condition surveys too. So we identify vacants that are in decent shape, but tax delinquent, nothing can be done to get to the owner. We work with the land bank to acquire those properties. We've done quite a few properties that way, or sometimes we track down owners. There's different ways to do that, but yeah, it is very property specific and market specific too.
What about contractors? Are you guys having trouble finding contractors?
I mean, it depends on for the type of work. I mean, we do some of our work, particularly our vacant home rehabilitation work, with our own in-house construction team. We use contractors for things like roofs and some of the more, specific trades type work, depending on the circumstances. But, certainly there are challenges with identifying contractors. We've been pretty good at identifying pretty reliable, capable local contractors to do a lot of the different types of things we need them for. A lot of our home repair work is, like for owner occupied home repair, is done by contractors. So things like roof replacements or things like that.
Yeah. Well, we're
It can
certainly
help if It can help if you're doing more, and I know that's easier said than done, but if you're doing more than one house, you know, in a time period, it can be more attractive to contractors if you're bidding out multiple jobs at once. So that can help. And even if you yourself are not, your organization is only taking on one property, maybe there is another nonprofit in a nearby area that you can partner with, who is doing, you know, one or two properties, and maybe you guys can jointly bid out your jobs together.
That's very interesting. Okay, well, I think we're just a couple of minutes before we close, and I don't see any new questions here. Anne's going to pull up our closing slides, which mainly is please join our community practice. And then you'll always know when we're having great webinars like this. You will always get our newsletter, and where we feature the case studies that Anne is writing up. She commented in the chat that she's written up case studies on one or another aspects of the work of both of our speakers today. So you'll get more detailed background information on those. And we just love having you and having you tell us how we can be more helpful to you in your work in middle neighborhoods. Thank you both so very much. Oh, and we always like to promote one of our partners, Center for Community Progress. They also have a great webinar series, which they call the Cornerstone Webinar Series. So go check them out and try and get on their mailing list too. If you ever have ideas for webinars you'd like to see, case studies you'd like to see written up, if you have news stories about your work, we'd love to feature them in our newsletter. And in other ways, just email us. It's Marcia, M-A-R-C-I-A @middleneighborhoods.org. We're going to put up an evaluation for this thing. And the other thing that I want to always remember to say is we are very happy to do a custom sort of Middle Neighborhoods 101 webinar for anybody who wants us to do it. So if you have, perhaps, your board of directors and staff, or if you have various neighborhood leaders who would be interested in this, or local government officials, any combination of people, we'd be happy to do a Middle Neighborhoods 101 and actually pull up some data about, or incorporate some data about your community in particular. We want to help get the word out and have people be paying attention to their middle neighborhoods. Thanks again, Jack and Becky. You guys are amazing. And I want to be your intern for a summer. Maybe this summer. It's really hot here in Arizona. And everybody have a fantastic rest of your week. And we'll see you next month. Bye-bye.